So sometimes it can be really hard to decide what you want to prime or undercoat your miniatures when you're using things like contrast paints or army paint or speed paints. In this video I'm going to be comparing 4 different types of, the popular undercoats, how they work with contrast paints and how they work with speed paints, and doing a comparison and giving you my overview of which ones I think have turned out best. Let me know in the comments what do you normally undercoat with, and also as I go through these, which one is your favourite. So let's get on with the video. So I used the Army Painter Air Undercoat Primer things, and to be honest, I really like these. They've finally become available just to buy on their own without being part of a starter set. And the undercoats that I've used for these miniatures are just a standard white. I also did a standard grey just to see how that one turned out. And then I've used 2 Zenithals, so I've used a black with white over the top, and then I've used a grey with white over the top just to see how that turns out. Now, historically, I've always used a grey with a Zenithal of white over the top because it's helped me to keep a lot of those details and colours, so I'll be interested to see how these turn out. So for this comparison, I have used 4 dwarves for each one of these, and they're all from Artisans Guild's latest monthly set. Now, I really like these dwarves. There's a decent amount of detail on there. We've got some flat surfaces on these. We've got a lot of curves. We've got a lot of hair as well, which is always good fun to paint. We've got the different weapons, so it should give us a decent comparison. Now, first up, let's kick off with just the pure white, and this seems to be one of the most popular ones that ever gets recommended if you're using contrast paints or speed paints, purely because it doesn't kind of leach away from that colour, and it really helps these colours to shine through. So in terms of the speed paints and the contrast paints, actually there was very little difference between these, and they came out pretty much identically across all of the different models, so there's not much difference there. There are a couple of different differences, and you'll probably see these on camera, but there's not a huge amount between them. So the white, honestly, I really like it, and I think this is probably one of the best if you're the kind of person who likes to use some shade afterwards, like your Nuln Oil and all of that sort of stuff. If you like to use your oil paints like I do afterwards to apply a wash, I think this could probably be the best because you'll have more control of where you're putting those shadows, where you're putting those highlights and everything else. Now, these come out really nicely. The colours pop on them, they look really good, and you kind of know what you're applying. You're not going to get any of that sort of, dulling down of some of the colours in certain areas. When it comes to the separation of colours, although there is a decent amount on there, it's not quite as good as some of the other ones when we come onto it, but you can tell the difference between the different colours. I've purposefully used colours that are quite similar when it comes to like the flesh tones and the leathers, just to see how much it stands out on camera. And yeah, you can see where the skin is, you can see where all the leathers are and everything else. So there's a decent amount of separation, not as much as I'd quite like on there. I definitely would want to go back in with a shade, but actually the white comes out very nice. Colours pop, everything looks good, can't really go too far wrong with it. The problem with doing it this way, unless obviously you use some shade afterwards or some oils and everything, can be really hard to kind of get into those hard to reach places, especially if you have them on the bases like I do, which gets taken care of with things obviously like a black with a white Zenithal over the top. So that's the white. Let me know in the comments, do you like that one? Is that the one that you normally go with? And moving swiftly on to the grey with a white Zenithal over top. Now again, between the speed paints and the contrast paints, they look very similar. There's not much between them, but this is normally my favourite way of undercoating. I tend to do it just because it allows all the colours to still pop with the contrast paints that I've used in the past and now the speed paints, but you also get a nice amount of shadow. Very similar to what we were getting on the white, but there is a little bit more in terms of shadow. There's a little bit more in terms of separation and stuff like that. I really like them. I think it looks good. It's probably my second favourite out of the whole lot. The thing that I really like about this is where the shadows are, it doesn't become just black, it becomes more of a dull version of the colour that you're applying with the speed paint or the contrast paint. So I think the grey with the white Zenithal over top is definitely one to be looking into if you're into this kind of painting. Moving on to, in my opinion, the best of the bunch, and that is just the standard traditional Zenithal highlight, which is black with white over the top of it. Now, when I come to Zenithal, I tend to go a little bit heavy on the white, which you can now see up on the screen, but ultimately the end result, in my opinion, looks really good. Speed paint and the contrast paint, again, I think they look fantastic when they come through, and it just adds a little bit of dimension to the model. So with the white, they tend to look, in my opinion, a little bit flat, and that's what I mean. You have to kind of go back in with some shade just to give it some more depth. But using it as a Zenithal, the colours still really pop, and they really do get highlighted on those areas where the whites hit the model. And then you get a nice amount of shadow, and it just adds a lot of dimension to the model. The other great thing is, well, those harder to reach spots, it doesn't matter because they're black, they look like shadow, and you don't have to worry about kind of getting your brush in there. So out of the lot, I think this one is my favourite, but again, let me know in the comments which one you prefer. So moving on to the final one, and I wasn't too sure what to expect with this, and this is just literally pure grey to see how it turns out. Now, I kind of like it, and I don't as well. With these, I guess it depends on the type of model that you're painting, but also the type of painter you are as well. So as you'll be able to see on screen, the colours, they don't pop anywhere near as much as they do on any of the models, and that's just because the grey is dulling it down and you're not getting as much colour coming through to it. The thing is though, they don't look bad. You still get a decent amount of colour on there. They just look a little bit more, I guess, like dirty. So this contrast painted one, he looks more like a dwarf that has been down in the mines and he's come out and he's all dirty. I also like the way the skin tone and everything is different between these. So you get a difference between your models and I guess the different colours and everything you've got on them. The type of painter I think that this would be perfect for is somebody who really likes to have some control of where you're putting the highlights. So this gives you a really nice, I suppose, base layer. So you've got all of those mids and you've got all of those darks, and it's already applied because of the way the grey works. You could then come back in and you could do maybe a dry brush to bring up some of the highlights. You could just go through and you can highlight, edge highlight, do whatever you like, maybe some glazing, and you get a really good amount of control over this because you've got, like I said, those lows and those mediums in terms of colour. So if you're somebody who really likes to kind of just do all your base in contrast paint or speed paint and then come back in and take a lot more control of your model, then this is probably a good way to go for it. One thing I will note that using the speed paints is that they kind of ran yet again, especially on this one here with the grey. Obviously it's not really going to get compared too much in this video because that's going to be for another one, but yeah, they are a bit more runny, so do take care of them. So that is it. They are the 4 different types of undercoat that I've compared here. I've got to say, in order of my favourite, I would say that the black with a white highlight is my first, that's my top. I really like how that's come out, adds a decent amount of dimension. Then it's the grey with the white highlight. I really like that. It takes care of things, adds a decent amount of shadow without being too dark. Then the white, I really like the way those colours pop, and if you're using some really colourful models, they would look fantastic because you have so much more control over where you go back in and put the shadows, and you get a lot of colour on these. And then the final one obviously is the grey. For me, I don't tend to do too much in terms of cleanup afterwards. I just use the contrast paints or the speed paints, and then I normally just call it done after I put a shade on there or my oil wash. With the grey, I'd need to come back in and do a lot more work, but if you are the kind of person who likes that, these could actually probably be some of your favourite ways to actually apply these paints because actually it gives you so much more control over where you're going to go back in and put those highlights. So let me know in the comments which one is your favourite, which one do you currently use, and are there any surprises there? For me, I'm surprised how well the black with a white Zenithal turned out. I think it looks fantastic. I did expect it to be far more washed out, and I know I was quite aggressive with that white highlight at the start, but I really like it. I thought my favourite would still have been the grey than the white, but nope, doesn't turn out that way. So let me know in the comments what's your favourite. I haven't done metallics in this video just because I'm going to be saving that for another video where I do a full comparison of the full contrast paint set versus the full Army Painter speed paints, and there's going to be loads of different things I throw in there like furs and skin and hair and smooth textures and how they paint over metallics. So let me know if there's anything that you want me to compare in that video. In the meantime, I really hope you've enjoyed that, and hopefully that's going to help you out a little bit in terms of what undercoat you're going to be using when it comes to speed paints and contrast paints. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Come along for some more painting and 3D printing content. I'll be back in the future with some more awesome content.